All right, folks, welcome back. I'm Dave. I got my good friend here, Charles, from the Lonewolf podcast, a man who has hit 400 subscribers now on YouTube. He's also got his stuff going over to Odyssey, which is great, new platform. And this video will be seen on both my Tulsiology channel and the Real Issue Observer, which has 15 subscribers right now. Good morning, Charles. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, David. I like you just mentioned about the 400 subscribers. I got to tell you, it sure is a lucrative business calling out the status quo.
Yeah. See, I made a smart move business wise because I just talked about Tulsi Gabbard and that seemed to work out. And then I left and I came back. My subscriber count, no matter what I do, though, it doesn't really change. I could announce the Abraham Lincoln channel or something, and it would be like, yeah, whatever. Not that I could talk about. Maybe I could talk about Lincoln.
I I've got a couple of videos out there that are well into the thousands on the viewer column. One in particular was on health care, but the subscriber count certainly doesn't reflect those couple of videos. And for sure, it's almost like I've been blacklisted. Every now and then I might make a video on a particular subject, but I could even get a subject that's everyone seems to be talking about. Major channels, everyone, it doesn't break through at all. It's like that there's no new viewers coming in. So I've definitely been put on the blacklist by YouTube.
Yeah, it does seem kind of fishy. And this week, tying into that, friend of ours, my friend Pasta, who is on my show for the first time. It's been, waiting for him to come on the show, and he's on the West Coast, and it's a little harder to coordinate. But his channel, the Convo Couch, just and it got banned, or at least for a week or something, he's not going to be on. And he's touching some third rails, and he's talking a bit about this thing you can't talk about with a certain presidential candidate's son who did something that you can't talk about. If we're not able to talk openly about corruption, because corruption is everywhere in our government, but this is corruption. Like, I don't know if you're probably not old enough to remember Kmart, when they had the blue light special in Kmart. You'd walk in there, and then basically like a siren in the middle of the store, and it would be bright blue lights flashing, and you'd hear an ear-piercing sound, and they were trying to tell you that they had a special deal on the floor, and you had to go running toward that blue light special, man. I mean, this to me is like a political blue light special at Kmart with a particular presidential candidate's son who had certain dealings in a particular country with a particular wife of a particular mayor of a large city. I'm trying to be vague on purpose to see what happens.
Yeah, that's what I was going to question, when you said you want to talk about this, was just how much detail do we want to get into, because our videos could end up getting banned next, you know what I mean? Yeah, and the thing on the Convo Couch, from what I gathered, he wasn't even banned for necessarily, well, according to the reasoning that was given, for talking about that particular subject. They cited some video from months ago about Wayfair, if I'm not mistaken, and that it was bullying, cyberbullying of a minor child. What? So, I don't know where they got the reasoning from, but yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if it doesn't have something to do with talking about that certain story. But the hypocrisy of that, and I'm not advocating for Donald Trump or Joe Biden here, but if that were a Trump story, they wouldn't ban you for talking about it, because guess what? Mainstream media is going to talk about it to no end. For God's sakes, when we have a country crumbling apart, bad infrastructure, wages weren't growing, healthcare wasn't getting any better, the life expectancy was going down, people's wealth was going down. In the midst of all of that, for a solid 6 months or so, the only thing we could hear about was Trump's scandal with Stormy Daniels. Now, think of that and consider that if we could hear that for that amount of time, but we can't hear this story about someone who was let out of discharge from the military, had a drug issue, and potentially took bribes to get access to the VP of the country and this and that. Look, that has way more significance than which porn star did Donald Trump sleep with when his wife may or may not have been pregnant with a child, or the child was in the house, or whatever. Like, really, the man is a billionaire. Okay, he is a playboy in a lot of ways. He's been one for years and years and years and years. And if you think that's breaking news, that people with a lot of money flaunt around with women and have affairs, welcome to reality, because it happens all the time. All the time. And if you need an example of some other politicians who've done things like that, one would be Bill Clinton that we know of, right?
Yeah.
But the other would be a man who I actually do think was a good politician, but without a doubt, he certainly had his sexcapades, and that was JFK.
Yeah.
So this isn't new, but yet we heard about that nonstop for 6 months or so. What a horrible thing it is. But this story can't even be talked about without you getting banned, censored. Your story gets taken down, and the mainstream media is running interference to call it propaganda and fake news. So,
yeah, no, you're 100% right on all those points. And you really have to kind of be devoid of any sort of intellectual integrity. And again, like you said, you're not advocating for Trump or Biden or whatever, but the treatment of these two guys in the media, and you could see it, the town halls, which we didn't talk about either. The treatment that Joe Biden got at the town hall was like, "Hi, Joe, is the lighting good enough for you? Do you you need another glass of water, Joe?" Whereas over on NBC, it was like, "Would you?" And Trump's just like, boof, boof, boof. And I'm watching this going, how do people think this isn't rigged? And again, you don't have to like Donald Trump. I'm not saying Trump is, above criticism or anything like this, but it becomes like a sparring match. And we saw that a little bit with Chris Wallace in the first debate with Trump to some degree. I think Trump kind of dug his own hole by not shutting up, but you could tell that Wallace was trying to clear a lane for Biden. He certainly wasn't trying to clear a lane for Trump. And this has been a theme. You and I were big Tulsi Gabbard supporters, so we can apply this to her. Different political party, very different political philosophy as well. And, she'd go on a show, she'd smile, she'd be wearing her Hawaiian garb, and then out came the daggers, and you were like, huh? Tulsi Gabbard? Well, I mean, she's pretty smart, She's on all these committees. She's serving her country in the military. She's very articulate on just about any topic, and she's been called all these names, and then she has to defend herself. So they're kind of trying to make her into a mean person. This is what they do with Trump. Trump's already kind of a rough and tumble guy, but you compare the personalities, you compare the policy ideas, and you're still getting the same treatment. This is the stuff me and Pasta we were talking about, is that anything that's outside of the predetermined narrative, neoliberal, neoconservative, as we know, there are quite a few neoconservatives who have thrown in with the Joe Biden campaign. And I listed a few of them the other day on Twitter. People like Donald Rumsfeld, people like Christopher Dodd, who's on the steering committee for Joe Biden. If that doesn't scare the daylights out of anybody who remembers what happened to our banking system back in 2008 and 9, and you're not sitting there going, holy crap, why would this guy, why we wouldn't let this guy near anything, dog catcher, for crying out loud. So I'm sitting here going, okay, I'm not a neoliberal. You can't make me into a neoliberal. There's nothing I agree with neoliberals on. There's not one issue. So it's just bizarre that the world of social media, large platforms, big tech companies, this monolithic political thought, which again, I don't know what you think of it, Charles. I don't know if you have a better name for it than, people come up with globalism. It's a new world order. The conspiracy people, it's a new world order. Everybody groupthink. I mean, what the hell's going on?
If I had to give it one good name, I believe I would call it the Big Brown Wave. But that being said, the thing with Donald Trump, and this is where a lot of people, and I've had to give it a little bit of thought, because I guess there's an argument to be made here. The argument is, well, why do they treat Trump so bad? The argument would be, when you equivalate him to Tulsi Gabbard and how Tulsi Gabbard was treated, Tulsi Gabbard really was kind of an outsider. And so if you're saying that they're treating Trump that way, that he must be an outsider too, but look what he's done. He hasn't really been an outsider. So how does that argument stand up? Well, here's the thing. If you're looking at it from that standpoint, you look at what Trump's done. Yes, he has been, in a lot of ways, a typical Republican. There have been a few differences that we could discuss. He hasn't started more war, but he didn't really do what he promised to do in withdrawals either, okay? But here's the big takeaway. The fact is, Trump isn't the outsider he claimed to be. Trump isn't the outsider he ran like he should be. But the thing is, his mouth does wonders. Okay. His mouth gets people's attention.
Yeah.
His mouth buries Republicans. His mouth will bury Democrats. His mouth is not afraid to call anyone out. You never know what he's going to say. And even though he hasn't completely governed as an outsider, his mouth ran like an outsider.
Yeah.
Okay. And because of all that, people have heard it. And the people in the mainstream media who are running interference for the mainstream Republicans, the mainstream Democrats, these corporatists who are completely for the rich, and they don't want outsiders to ever gain any power. The reason they are so hell-bent to take Donald Trump down is because they're afraid of his rhetoric and his mouth. They're afraid that if enough people keep listening to him talk about some of these issues, that it's going to keep causing people like Joe Biden's or Jeb Bush's or Kamala Harris or Marco Rubio's. These people might not ever make a rise back to power. So we've got to attack him. We've got to bury him, and we've got to keep him down, because what we don't want to see on the right or the left are someone like a Ron Paul ever reemerge and potentially win. Yeah. Someone like a Tulsi Gabbard reemerge and potentially win on one of these platforms the way Donald Trump did. We've got to make him be quiet, come at him, throw all the rocks we got at him. You see, the last time they made the critical mistake of thinking that Trump was such a buffoon, we'll just show what he's got to say to everyone, and they'll figure out, oh, he's a fool. He runs his mouth. He doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's going to lose. So they gave him all that free coverage. Well, now he's the president, and he has to get a certain amount of coverage. So that's why you'll see when they put like a rally or something on CNN, instead of letting it play through now, they do a lot of cut-ins.
Yeah.
They cut in to give their take on what he just said and explain to you, the viewer, why he's lying to you right now. They've got to run that interference, and they're trying to keep that outsider message down. And so that's the reason why Trump gets treated a lot the same way that Tulsi Gabbard did. Not because he's actually an outsider, but because his mouth, you never know what he's going to say. And so they're trying to bury him just as a precaution to protect the status quo.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point about, what they do. They basically edit and filter Trump, and they don't let people really see his rallies, and his fans, they have to go to
Right.
like different channels. I think there's one called RSBN, which covers it in a positive Trump kind of way that the Trump people, I've watched it a few times because I don't want to hear Jake Tapper comment. I don't need Jake Tapper's commentary on anything for crying out loud. So I want to see, there is a level of excitement at a Trump rally that certainly is not there at the Biden events. But there are no people at the Biden events. But this is an important point, Charles, that you made about in 2016, there was this relationship the media had with Trump that was very interesting. It was like, yeah, we love the fact that this guy pulls in the ratings for us. We love the fact that this is a bull in a china shop. This is a car wreck. We're going to keep putting it on the air, and our ratings are going to go up and up and up. Well, look what they're doing this time around. They're throwing the kitchen sink, trying to undo what they did in 2016. And it's kind of laughable because nobody's going to turn on the TV to watch Joe Biden give a speech. Nobody's going to care what Joe Biden's going to say tomorrow. If they can get Joe out of the bunker tomorrow, they're going to cover it as a big story. Like Joe didn't put a lid on his activities today at 10 a.m. I mean, he was up and had his his oatmeal, and then he was off to try to maybe complete some sentences and then come back, and he's done for the day. I mean, from an entertainment standpoint, I know this is way off the political track, but the way I look at it today is, unfortunately, if you look at platforms like TikTok, right? I can give you a good example, and it dovetails with this. There's an old song by Fleetwood Mac that is now super duper popular because it got on this platform. Some dude drinking a Gatorade or a cranberry juice, and he's hanging on a skateboard, and he's lip syncing a few lines. And an album now from 1977 is in the top 10 most downloaded tracks this week because a bunch of people got to see it, and it was in a certain format. I don't understand it. I'm an old dude. I don't get this. I used to listen to music because I liked it, Now it's got to be in a video game, or it's got to be part of a I don't know, like a movie soundtrack where you hear 30 seconds of it. Or then again, TikTok, which by the way is a Chinese owned platform, which again, not going off on conspiracies here, just stating the facts. So the visibility, like the entertainment value of a Trump, there are a lot of people that just will vote on the fact, hey, I like Trump. He's funny. He's interesting. He's entertaining. He and Biden, maybe it's the two sides of the same coin, but I like him better than the other guy. The other guy seems to me, and he's been in Washington for 47 years. And I think in the debate, I think Trump did a good job, and it's an easy target. You've been there for a long time, dude. What have you done for us lately or at all? And there are a lot of human beings that walk around here and around the world that just look at those two guys and go, Trump doesn't drink beer, but I mean, he'd be the guy to hang with if you're going to go out and have a beer. He'd be funny. He'd be bombastic. I think he's more relatable to some people in flyover country. Biden is just like this washed up, maybe in his heyday, like back in the 70s or something. He was the Scranton Joe, or he tried to come off as, I'm blue collar. I came from, I mean, he's got ads running down here that says, the ads say his dad worked hard and had to struggle to pay the bills. And then it just cuts to Joe, later on. And I'm like, well, Joe didn't work very hard to pay the bills, but maybe his dad did. So we have to go back a generation beyond that, which is like 100 years ago, because Biden is like 78, So I don't know, dude. I just look at this, and I'm not happy about the choices we have. I'm going to talk about what I did, because I did go early vote yesterday, and I figured I'd do a confession here on the show and tell you exactly what I did toward the end. Be suspenseful for those of you who want to know. But what say you on all this media basically biting their nose off to spite their face with the coverage of Trump versus Biden?
Well, first of all, we must acknowledge that Joe Biden did have to work very, very hard, David. He had to work very, very hard to keep Corn Pop from cutting him. Okay, Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys. He had to work real hard to keep from getting his ass beat on that particular day. Okay, just got to throw that out there.
All right,
you
man.
Can't take anything away from Joe. Okay,
Corn
that's
Pop.
where he learned to become a tough guy.
Yep.
Nonetheless, yeah. So that being said, to your question, the mainstream media learned a lesson about, like you pointed out, let's just put Trump on the air for ratings. Unfortunately, that's what's been determining the mainstream media is sponsorships and ratings. It's no different than like a television program. I mean, it's on television, but this is supposed to be the news, right?
Right.
We should be above entertainment. This should be above the sitcom on television and how many ratings is it drawing in per season. Okay, the news should not be measured that way. The news is supposed to be something informative. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
It's terrible that the mainstream media had got to that point, but they learned a lesson, and that is, we're going to do this all for ratings. We'll put Trump all over television, and they did, and he won. And the problem is now they still have to put him on there to a degree, but like you said, they want to throw all these stones at him. For example, we were talking about the town halls. We never covered the town halls with Trump and Biden.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing that I noticed, you talked about with Joe, like, is the lights coming before you. Joe was at a town hall and actually got asked town hall questions.
Yeah.
Donald Trump was at a town hall and got asked moderator questions. He got a few town hall questions, but I thought this was the whole point of the town hall, was for people to be asking Donald Trump. But instead, whoever the lady was, I don't remember her name, it was more or less what she wanted to ask Donald Trump, what she wanted to try to rake him over the coals on, not what an undecided voter in the crowd wanted to see.
Right.
And the thing of it is, if Trump didn't have certain other elements that were kind of, in my opinion, hurting him going into this election cycle, people seeing that would be looking at that, and it would be very much like 2016. They would see that there's a media bias, and it might actually encourage more people to potentially go out and vote for Donald Trump. And it still may yet do that for some, but the downside to things are the fact that Donald Trump has had a case of his foot being in his mouth for quite some time now, all the way through COVID, all the way through recent events with the Bob Woodward leaks. And he didn't focus on some of the issues he should have in this campaign. Unlike some people, I'm not opposed to his law and order message. In my opinion, our society has gotten away from having some common sense. So to me, law and order isn't necessarily a bad thing to have at this point in time.
Yeah.
But do I believe you could win the election with everything going on just based on law and order? No. Because there's some people who want law and order, but want the economy to get better, want the job systems to be fixed. And to me, he did a better job on focusing on those issues last time than he did this time around. Yeah. And so that's the thing that certain Trump diehards don't realize coming into this election cycle. Like you pointed out, David, the American people, if they were smart enough to really examine these two candidates, would probably overall be smart enough to either stop voting for Democrats or Republicans, or at least be smart enough to stop listening to propaganda networks like mainstream media. But the problem is, millions of Americans continue to gather their information from news sources who've lied us into war, pushed all sorts of false propaganda, tried to push us into conflict with Russia because they're claiming there was interference in elections and whatnot, even though we interfere in our own elections and we interfere in other people's elections. So they still listen to the news this way. So to say that for the Trump diehards that, oh, all the people can look at what's happened to Trump and the witch hunt, and of course he's going to win. No, there's not a lot of people who look at how he was treated from that aspect. And some of us who look at the whole picture aren't impressed with what he's done necessarily in 4 years. Yeah. For the folks who don't look at the picture that way, what you got to understand, Trump did not win, but the Electoral College. If he hadn't won the Electoral College, he wouldn't be president right now. He didn't carry the popular vote. And so odds are he's probably not going to carry the popular vote again this time. That means there are only a few states who are going to make or break this entire election. Now, the states that seem to be talked about a lot are Ohio, Florida, North Carolina, right? And they really put emphasis on Florida. Well, we'll say Trump carries Florida, carries North Carolina, and carries Ohio. He could keep all three of those. Yep. He picked off three particular states the last time around, okay? And that's what took him over the 270 threshold. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Now, right now, he's fairly neck and neck in Pennsylvania. So we'll be generous and say Trump carries Pennsylvania again. But Joe Biden is supposed to be ahead in Wisconsin and Michigan. And I got news for you. Just based on that, if Trump were to lose those states, the election's probably going to go to Joe Biden. Yeah. I mean, unless there are some wild cards out there we're not anticipating, Trump losing those two states, just those two states, could hand that whole thing over to Joe Biden. So that's what a lot of people are going to have to look at going into the election. The mainstream media do what they want to, but at the end of the day, Trump's got a much harder uphill battle than a lot of people are giving Joe Biden credit for.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not happy at all with Joe Biden as a candidate, and I've looked. No. I've looked at his candidacy in every possible way. There's no policy. There's no substance to it. He co-ops Trump on a lot of things. He's been running ads down here. I told you about, we need to bring jobs back to America. Really? You didn't do that in the 90s. You sold us out. You've been selling us out. See, that's where I think Trump's message could resonate in states like Michigan. But I mean, is it too late? It's because of the 4 years and there's not enough. And Trump could say, hey, I was hamstrung by all of this, Russia BS and so forth. And I think there's an argument to be made for that. But I think what happened along the way is that Trump at times wasn't disciplined. I thought the last debate, I thought he was very disciplined. That was a kind of a different Donald Trump. He was still on point and not angry, but assertive. We'll say this. And he called Biden out on some things, and he sounded way better. And you could hear, the microphone thing wasn't a real problem. I mean, I didn't hear nobody shut anyone's microphone off from what I can tell. But Trump was interrupting in the first debate, and it was chaos. And actually, he did make a lot of good points in that first debate, but because everybody was shouting, people were just throwing their hands up in the air going, geez, wonder if I can go watch Cheers, for whatever show. Just turn this off for a little while so I can watch something else. And that's how I was feeling. I wasn't even really that enthusiastic to watch debate number 2. I don't know why. I just wasn't. I felt as though if you hadn't made up your mind at that point, you're probably, I don't know. There are a lot of casual fans in music, just like there are a lot of casual political fans. People like the band, but they don't know who's in the band. People like the party, but they don't know what the party stands for. Both Democrats and Republicans do that, to be honest with you. They think, oh, Republicans are for the party of the rich and the Democrats are for the little guy. Not necessarily. I mean, there may be some of that going on in the Republican Party, like the Jeb Bush Republican type folks. Those are the people, by the way, that are for Joe Biden. So that should tell you something. But I'm fully aware that the difference between Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, and I've said this probably in another video or two, is that Joe Biden is liked more than Hillary Clinton. Generally speaking. I mean, the more I get to know Joe Biden, though, the more he's creepy and scary to me. But I'm talking about the general voter population. They like Joe Biden probably more than Hillary Clinton. That in and of itself might be enough to carry the day for Joe Biden in some of these swing states where it's like, all right, I didn't like her. She was annoying. This guy, he's just like a goofball, and he'll be better than Trump, which is a lie, but he'll be better than Trump. So just going to go vote for him. And, just so the chaos ends and not paying attention to any of the policies, the fact that Biden he said he's going to lock everything down again. He said it. He said those words. 3 months. He wants to do a 3-month mandatory mask mandate and lock everything down. And to me, I'm just pulling my hair out, just saying, okay, and I want to vote for something positive. I don't want to play prevent defense voting. I would like to vote for something rather than say, well, I'm voting against you and I'm going to vote for somebody else because I don't want you to get elected. And I think there's a lot of that on both sides in this election where people are afraid, oh, Biden's going to take my guns away, so going to vote for Trump. Or, can't stand Donald Trump's personality, don't like him, he's mean, he's angry, going to vote for Biden. What does he stand for? I don't know. I just want things to get back to normal. The normal that you're going to go back to, I'll tell you what, like you say, we made this up. It will be a brown wave no matter who ends up winning this election.
Absolutely. It's going to be. People are blinded because they hate Trump's tweets, and the mainstream media talks about them all the time. Yeah. And so we need someone again who can act presidential. And to me, while I guess there's a case to be made about needing someone who can be presidential at certain times, it's a little overblown.
Yeah.
Sure, if there's a time of crisis, we need someone who can lead calmly, in my opinion. But at the same time, this whole thing about having to act, like you're, born with the silver spoon in your mouth, speak with the proper English, this and that, all this grammar, all this sophistication, you lost that kind of a president because you took us down a rabbit hole where we became an unsophisticated society.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
From all sorts of different directions, our society is just not nearly as friendly, cooperative, or neighborly as it used to be. And that's due to a lot of reasons. I mean, arguably a lot of it is just because our daily lives aren't as enjoyable as they used to be. People have gotten lost into a world of technology. They don't spend time getting to know people, interacting with their neighbors, interacting with their families. Of course, during COVID, you can't do that anyway because it's illegal to get out and about and travel to some areas, right? So there's a lot of problems there, but you brought up about Joe Biden being a lot more likable than Hillary Clinton. And I've got to kind of walk a tightrope when I say it this way. The thing is, Joe Biden has certainly done plenty of pandering himself. The Despacito song, the recent rap song about coming out to vote with the two guys rapping at the basketball court. Yeah. Okay. You've got all these different things Joe Biden is doing to try to pander as well. But Hillary Clinton has had such a blatant history of just trying to change to blend in like a chameleon. For example, if you go back and you watch the Hillary Clinton of the early 90s that was Bill Clinton's husband, she really kind of talked with a little bit of country accent in her voice. Yeah. She was from Arkansas. Yep. And then all of a sudden she becomes president and all of a sudden that accent disappears.
Sure did.
She becomes that sophisticated lady. That old Southern accent from Arkansas all of a sudden just vanished, right? But then she was giving a speech to a group of African American voters, and all of a sudden a new accent dawned, one we've never heard from her before. Now all of a sudden she's trying to speak in a way where she sounds like a woman of color. So look, the you know, there's a big fight against the white man. We've heard about that. The white man's been in power for too long, right? But let's be honest about something, okay? As bad as people look at a white man, there's a lot of stigmas that surround the white woman too.
Sure.
Okay. And if you need the proof of that, look at what's going on right now with all that Karen stuff. Karen. Now, going off that whole Karen analogy, if I had to pick someone who is the epitome of what is being described as a Karen, Hillary Clinton comes to mind. Seriously, think about it. We're talking about an old white woman who throws temper tantrums when she can't get things her way. Will try to do whatever she has to get her way, and is just vile and nasty when she doesn't. She's like that old rich woman that comes to the store and then just badgers the employees because she doesn't think she's getting her butt kissed well enough. That's exactly what Hillary Clinton reminds you of. So for the people who don't think that Joe Biden could be more likable than Hillary Clinton, and they cite reasons such as him sniffing people and how, you know, he can't get his sentences together. I mean, yeah, you got a point, but arguably there's another side of Joe Biden that people have seen, and it's that laughable blue collarish guy, right? I mean, he's not, but he's kind of portrayed himself that way. I got news for you. Even though he's a white man, a lot more people like that kind of personality than someone like Hillary Clinton, who again reminds you of that old rich white lady that just gets on your nerves when she comes to the store. She is the epitome of a Karen. That's why she didn't resonate. So of course Joe Biden is far more likable. So it's not unheard of that he is probably going to do better than Hillary Clinton did, especially after what we've had this year alone with Trump.
And for those who do like the Karen type person, Joe Biden picked a vice president who will certainly hold down that legacy. And in fact, there's no worries if Joe isn't able to function as president. Hillary Clinton does get her way. She gets to live vicariously through the amazing Kamala Harris, who is a woman of color. Some do contest how much color, but in any event, I don't want to go down that rabbit trail, but certainly she's got, you know, Canadian roots and Jamaican roots and Caucasian roots as well. But, you know, hey, and this is the thing about the left, at least the neoliberal left, all right, is they care about pigmentation. They care about that more than, and they say they're the party that's not racist, but they're always like race. You think to yourself, man, shut up about race. Is the person qualified for the gig? Okay, Tulsi Gabbard ultimately qualified and checked all the ID politics boxes until the sun came down. Minority religion on top of it. Woman of color, woman, you know, would have been the first Hindu, right? So you've got all of these different things, and people, Tulsi Gabbard, nah, she's wrong on foreign policy. We got to keep fighting. We got more war. So, I mean, Charles, this is more about, you know, fitting into that box. And Americans, and you know this because with just the way Americans are, Americans hate change. They hate it. See, Trump, and you talked about Trump's mouth alone, never mind his policies, some of his policies were a little disturbing to Americans, but it was his mouth. Okay. again, we'll talk about decorum. Oh, if he could have just been more like George W. Bush, if he could have just been more like Barack Obama, eloquent, smooth, brings a sense of calm and peace, not this bull in a china shop baloney where he's running around and he's calling out military generals. You don't do that, even if it's just calling them out. I never heard it. I mean, Eisenhower was the last guy to really do that, to say, hey, I mean, I took note of that, even though, like you say, it's kind of like in the old days in the music industry, when I worked at the radio station, record labels would call and they'd say, could you play this song for me? It's great. And I'd be like, I can't stand this song, but you know what I'll do? I'll write it down on paper and I'll post it and I'll tell everybody else in the industry I'm playing it. And I'll play it once at like 2:00 in the morning. See, the song has been added to the playlist. I did what I said I was going to do. I kind of wasn't the most, I wasn't a lot of integrity with that, but it's done. In a lot of ways, Trump just yelling at military generals and saying things like that must drive them crazy, where he says, all you guys want to do is go to war. And I don't want to do that. See, what he's doing is he's pitting the military industrial complex against the population, not against necessarily him, because he's putting it out there. But see, and this is where you and I, if we really examine the policy, meantime, Trump is like, okay, maybe we need to send a few more troops to, the Persian Gulf, just in case something happens, and you're like, okay, but over here he's yelling and screaming, and over here he's putting out more troops. So this ain't Ron Paul. This isn't Tulsi Gabbard. This is, I'm Donald Trump. I'm a businessman. I'm a negotiator. I placate this group. I make this group over here feel good. And they think, hey, I'm bringing all these troops. And he says that now on the stump a lot. He's like, and we're bringing troops home. And people clap. Yeah, we're bringing them home. And I'm thinking, well, you're not bringing that many home. You've stabilized and you're not creating any new war. And we have to give him a little credit for that, because that is something every president, and I guarantee you, this is the thing people have to think about when they vote. Biden goes and gets elected. Generals, not even generals, just, staff, cabinet members are going to come up to him and go, we've been wanting to do this Venezuela thing, but Trump wasn't keen on it. What do you say? Sure, you guys know what you're doing. I trust you. I've been around 47 years. You guys never steered me wrong. That Gulf War thing, hey, I'm glad we got Saddam Hussein. That was amazing. Secretly, I'm really happy about that. Me and Dick Cheney, we get along really well. and this is it. We've got one government. We got one party. And as Jimmy Dore says, it's the corporate party. All right. And until people understand that and get a little bit more sophisticated than blue versus red, loudmouth Trump against Biden, who can barely get through a sentence, until they can get that, we're going to be stuck. We're going to be in the brown mire, Charles. And, and it's not just a wave. It's like thick, gross sludge. Somebody on Twitter, I tweeted out about brown wave and they go, ooh, that's disgusting. And then I think you had the pipe with the brown sludge coming out of it. And I think I retweeted that and I was just laughing because at some point, you have your little whiskey, you have a nice cold beer. You got to kick back and say, there's only so much a man can do. There's only we're here and we're gone. We're here for a while and we're gone. We hope to make the world a little bit of a better place. And we do this political stuff. Maybe it's just all for nothing. Maybe you and I are doing this and we're venting. We're trying to be regular, real people. And other people go, I'm going to go. You know what I'm doing this weekend? Monster trucks, man. I'm going to see monster. Or, I'm going to do this weekend? I'm heading to the beach with my family. It's tired of tuning on, hearing about COVID-19 every 10 seconds and how many new cases there are. What say you, buddy?
Yeah. I mean, you're right. There's only so much we can do. And the problem is certain online platforms make it even harder for us to reach more people to help get that message out there. Again, this is, I think you brought up Jimmy Dore and the corporate party. I'll bring up George Carlin and the old famous stand-up line. It's a big club and you ain't in it. You and me and a few other YouTubers we could probably name off right now, we're not in that club. We're certainly not. They are in the club, and they're working together to make sure people like us don't wake some of the other people up that ain't in the club. You know what I mean? We got to have a way to get those people's ear, and the club's making sure we're not going to get that done. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that creates a massive, massive, massive uphill battle in of itself. You know, the biggest, it's going to come down to this.
Yeah.
Either we find a way to reach people, or people end up getting to the point that they're going to naturally wake up because of what's going on. And my only problem with it happening that way is I feel like what it would take for people to finally snap out of it would be the moment that it's collapse time. Like, there's no avoiding it. There's no denying it. It's like the Titanic trying to miss the iceberg. You can try, but you're going to hit.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, well, guess what? You're really screwed either way you turn. You know, it's like the video that I made about the brown wave. The footage of the big, massive, sludgy brown wave that came down the hill and washed out the town.
Yeah.
Okay. I did that in a way for humor, but there is a deeper meaning there. And one thing that I put on the end was after showing different clips in between of, you know, the poo humor. Okay. I put on there, I said, you know, don't want to see this happen, then stop voting for Democrats or Republicans. Otherwise, enjoy and get ready for another wave in 2024.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just what's going to happen. As long as there's people who continue to turn in and watch propaganda news networks, as long as that's what they're doing to educate themselves, and they're stuck in this idea of, well, yeah, and this is what kills me. Not every American that I've talked to believes that the Democrat Party and the Republican Party are the answer. A lot of people, surprisingly, don't believe that if I go vote for this Democrat or if I go vote for this Republican, there's really going to be a huge difference. Some people do it out of a fear of the other, but even though they're not necessarily saying I want to vote for Trump just because I'm afraid of Joe Biden, the reason they'll never vote third party and they just hold their nose and vote for one of the two is because they'll tell you, well, the third party has no chance of winning and I'm wasting my vote for them. So likewise, I might as well just be voting for a Democrat if I was a Republican, right? Yeah. Or if I was Democrat and I vote Libertarian or Green Party, I'm actually voting for a Republican. How people have been convinced of this shows just how much mind control the mainstream media has.
Yeah.
Okay. Where did common sense go? If I vote for Joe Jorgensen, guess what? That means I voted for Joe Jorgensen. I didn't vote for Joe Biden. I didn't vote for Donald Trump. And for any of the people complaining, saying, well, I enabled the other one to win. If Biden wins, I enabled Biden to win. And so it's my fault. No, it's Donald Trump's fault. Donald Trump didn't do enough to win my vote.
Right.
Okay. It's not my fault that you got Joe Biden and you think Joe Biden is a worse candidate when Donald Trump didn't live up to his promises. If it turns out that Donald Trump wins, guess what? Joe Biden didn't earn my vote. There was a Tulsi Gabbard on that stage that I would have voted for.
Yeah.
If Bernie Sanders had won, I might have voted for Bernie Sanders. If Andrew Yang had won, I might have voted for Andrew Yang.
Yeah.
Okay. But here's the deal. They didn't win. Joe Biden won. Yeah. And Joe Biden won because the status quo gathered behind him. Bernie was holding the majority out of those three that I mentioned. And then he pretty much folded over and handed it over to Biden.
Yeah.
Okay. So when that happened, Joe Biden pretty much was just like, okay, yep, I'm the one, I'm the anointed one. Everybody give me my vote. He's done nothing to earn my vote. He's talked platitudes. He's played the race card. He's tried to pander to different minorities to win support. But the one thing he hasn't done is actually really talked about good policy that helps blue collar people of any race. He hasn't done it. So he didn't earn my vote. Trump didn't earn my vote. But the problem is they've convinced so many people I can't go vote for who actually might have my best interests in mind, whether they win or not. Because if I do, I'm actually really voting for the one that I certainly don't want. I mean, it's so crazy. And if people can't snap out of this, yeah, we're going to eventually head towards a collapse.
Yeah. Well,
that'll certainly be fun.
Yeah. Well, if we're still able to get on platforms and do videos, it'll be a really tumultuous and interesting time to be a commentator during all of this. And we know something's coming. You and I have boiled it down to a brown wave. And like I've said, it doesn't matter. I mean, if Trump ends up winning, there's going to be a ton, I believe, of civil unrest like you've never seen, especially in these places that you've seen the civil unrest before this year. And again, you add all of this to, people's insecurities about the future and COVID and, endless masking, endless lockdowns. Remember, it was 15 days to slow the spread. Remember that? Flatten the curve. Well, that curve, was flattened if you go look at stats, but, if there are any cases where you live, people start freaking out. People don't freak out about the flu when you start seeing cases there. And, we could talk about all that COVID stuff. Maybe one of these days you and I will do a COVID video because I think, but COVID videos don't do well on various platforms either, because you start talking stats and just in proportion. Again, I'm not here to tell you that COVID's zero, like it's nothing, but if we're ever going to get back to normal, like people say, well, we want the new normal, or, if you vote for Biden, for instance, you go back to normal, almost like a threat. Like, well, maybe some of this stuff will go away. It's like a dog whistle. Maybe some of this stuff will go away if you don't vote for Trump, if you vote for Biden. And, like you said, Trump during part of this, just saying, he should have said, I'm trying to keep people from getting, excited about it or scared. But the media does it anyway. The media will just keep doing it. And this is their new, like if Trump loses, right, they can just focus on COVID. They can focus on the hysteria there. And then if Biden fumbles the ball, which it's just not going to end well. Trump said that in the first video about ballot harvesting. It's not going to end well. And he was right. See, this election, if you're going to vote for either Biden or Trump, I would say vote for Trump. That's what I would tell you. And there are reasons for it that I think I've explained over time. If you don't want to try to build another movement, because we all know that Joe Jorgensen is not going to win the election, but there are rumors that stats coming out of her campaign that Gary Johnson's numbers in 2016, she's already on pace to blow those out of the water, and she might double those numbers. And if she does, she's getting over 5% probably nationwide. 5% of the popular vote would be huge for 2024. And with Tulsi Gabbard lurking out there, maybe we don't know what she's going to do. Even if it's somebody else who's out there, person that you and I don't even know yet, somebody who, like a Thomas Massey, for instance, if he wanted to defect, or Justin Amash toyed around with it a little bit. Maybe he wanted to wait and build an arsenal, get an organization together. It would take a few years to do that, especially if he's got an L in front of his name rather than an R. He's going to have to go begging people for money, and he's going to have to do it very grassroots. But people, regardless, maybe people need to elect Biden. So again, things can just get worse and worse and worse. And then, as you say, that's the point where we go, okay, uncle, I've had enough. I've had enough. I'm listening now. You're telling me about third parties. You're telling me about being an independent. Um, I've been a registered independent off and on for the most of my life. I have been a Republican. I have been a Democrat. Just to vote for Tulsi Gabbard, though, I've not been a Democrat other than to do that. And I'm open to a lot of different things. I guess the point I'm trying to make is in the future, I'm hoping politics looks way different than it does right now.
Yeah. And this is nothing against the folks like the Joe Jorgensens, the Tulsi Gabbards, Gary Johnson, or any of these folks. But the big thing that we've got to look at is our society is very wrapped up in a pop culture. Yeah. And I know there might be a bad taste in people's mouth because of what happened when we elected Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. But you've got to realize who tends to get the biggest support from the grassroots movement. Even I would argue from some independent folks out there. Yeah. People whose name have been in spotlight at some point, Hollywood or whatever, tend to get a lot of attention. And so to me, one of the best ways, and I certainly hope Jorgensen can break the 5%. If I'm not mistaken, if she breaks the 5%, then we'll for sure have the ballot access, and that won't be an issue at that point, and that's a good thing with the Libertarian Party is they've got the ballot access in the 50 states. And if it stays that way, then you've got really the foundation for a good third party. The people who are saying that movement for the People's Party, I heard Jimmy Dore say just the other day that we're building a real competitive third party. And the only problem I have with that is there's been third parties built before. If it was that easy and Rome could be built in a day, why is it taking this long? And why are the ones that have been out there not doing any better when they've already got the ballot access? Right. How is this one party in a system where the Democrats and Republicans really have the stranglehold going to just break through and compete against two other third parties who are more developed and established, plus the two main parties, the Democrats and the Republicans? See, if you were just trying to really get behind one of the third parties that already exist, that way you had less competition to compete against. You've only got, say, the Constitution, Green Party, Democrat, Republican. But if I'm a movement for a People's Party and I come in, now I've got to compete against Constitution, Libertarian, Green, Democrat, and Republican. Just what? So to me, that's going to make it even harder. Right. But the thing is, there's a lot of people out there who have shown me that they're celebrities and they can identify a problem. For example, there's a great video from Michael Douglas talking about the problem with Democrats and Republicans. Okay, people know Michael Douglas, right? If Michael Douglas ran for president on the Libertarian ticket, for example, right, there'd probably a lot of people going, ooh, for example. Right. Similar in the way that when Kanye West announced that he would be running for president, there were a lot of people that turned and went, ooh, okay. Now, I certainly wouldn't push for Kanye to be the one who runs on the Libertarian ticket the next time around, in my personal opinion. To me, he's a little too cracked for me. But nonetheless, you need someone who can have that name recognition, bring that attention to the party so that more people start to examine the party. Because I got news for you. When they're that much of a celebrity and they've got that kind of social media following and they're that well known, if they do that, it's a lot like Donald Trump in the sense the mainstream media can't really hide it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like Jesse Ventura, for example. There's all that grassroots movement behind Jesse Ventura. He just never pulled the trigger. If you got someone like that, that could bring that attention really to it, you've really got a much better chance. So that would be my, my plea to some of these celebrities who always love to put themselves in the political world, right? And tell us what we need. For the ones who actually have common sense enough to know Democrats and Republicans are not the answer, then why don't one of you actually step up to serve your country and give us a real chance at putting them out?
Yeah. Yeah. See, I've gone, and I agree, I've gone back and forth on this because I get irritated with celebrities. I get irritated, like Bruce Springsteen telling me he's going to leave the country and he's going to do this, he's going to do that. Bruce, if you don't like it, buddy, step up and do something about it. He's got the name ID. Right. He could do it. But I probably wouldn't like his politics because he tends to be a neoliberal. I mean, most of Hollywood tends to be neoliberal. Right. Now, you make the case about Michael Douglas. Now, he would probably be a good candidate because at least in that speech, he was trying to kind of unite. He was trying to say, look, Democrats over here, Republicans over here, yelling and screaming. He's talking more or less about tribalism, and tribalism is just like rooting for your team without knowing what the team does. It's like, right. Oh, did you know your team is pro-war 100% of the time? No, they're anti-war. No, they're actually more war now than Donald Trump is. Did you know that? Oh, really? I didn't know that. So people don't care. They play video games and they're like blowing crap up and they go, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I blow stuff up. These are people who are dying in other countries. If you think Black Lives Matter, you should probably take a look at some of those black lives and brown lives that are getting destroyed in other countries by our military on a daily basis. I mean, people can't think in those terms, Charles, because the news doesn't talk about it. There's how there's a debt clock, right? That the national debt going up every day. And I think, again, there's eventually going to be consequences for that. There is, I think there's a site that just documents all of the death in other countries, especially in Afghanistan and any of our Middle Eastern operations that were still on the ground, whether it's just, mortar fire that goes, friendly fire, whatever it is, soldiers getting killed in the line of duty, just doing regular tasks. I mean, these are things that Americans don't hear about. It's not reported. We do hear a lot about scandals involving Donald Trump's, former mistresses and so forth. And we did for a while, and we'll hear it as a distraction from real issues. But I wanted to address something you said about, the two, let's be honest, the two major third-party candidates aren't all that exciting as human beings. I'm just putting it out there. I've listened to both of them speak. I would say Joe Jorgensen's a little more exciting than Howie Hawkins, but you could put them both in a room and have them debate. And I think you'd be drinking a lot of Diet Coke. You'd be like, all right, give me another one. Better go up to the Monster. Give me a Monster, because this is going to be I'm going to go to sleep. And Americans do, and this is why I would say, again, not voting for Trump because he's a celebrity or he's got star power or whatever, but that was something. People were, oh, I know this guy. He's been around. He's the real estate guy in New York. He's been in movies. He's had that television show, The Apprentice. Mark Cuban was constantly kind of flirting with the same idea. Mr. Shark Tank, he was going to go in and he was going to do a campaign as, I think, maybe either as a Democrat or an independent. And he kept toying with the idea, Mark, if you're going to do it, do it. So I would agree. And the Green Party, Pasta, when he was on, he talked about in the Green Party, and when I was getting more involved trying to figure out what I was going to do, and I was really exploring the Green Party and thought I might go there, there is a group of people in the Green Party, and Howie Hawkins, unfortunately, is part of that are very authoritarian. Their rhetoric, and you listen to it, it's very neoliberal. It's like turning on MSNBC. It's not, it's Democrat neoliberal on steroids. Yeah, they talk about things like the Green New Deal and so forth, but they don't really have the same kind of plans to enact things. It's just they have a lot of proposals, all right? But they're the same people who would look at Donald Trump and say, we're going to impeach him because of Russian collusion, not because, and It's an imaginary thing. It didn't happen. It doesn't exist. We've gone over this. And then there's another group within that party that's less. They're like left libertarians is what they are. And that's an interesting group of people because they believe in freedom of speech. They don't believe in cancel culture. They don't believe, what they believe in is that the little guy needs to be helped and then you mind your own business. You stay out of other people's affairs and so forth. That's interesting. It's an interesting philosophy. I don't know if I'm that left when it comes to economics, but we know the Libertarian Party on economics is right now kind of like, hey, capitalism works great. Just have to free it up. Just have to get rid of all of the restraints. Got to rein in the banks, maybe reform some laws, get things like it's a level playing field, and then it will work. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, if we didn't have the Federal Reserve Bank, I think that would be a good start to do a test run of that. But these banks get bigger and bigger and bigger. And sometimes, you have to work within the system that you have. And I think that's why people are like, yeah, just bail people out. My gut always says, well, where's that money coming from? I mean, even though I think the bailouts should go to people and not corporations, my worry still is we're inventing money, Charles. And nobody seems to understand that that's eventually it's going to cause inflation. It could actually cause the dollar to completely collapse. Now you got the petrodollar and you got other things that kind of prop it up, but countries are eventually going to go, how can you be a country and be like $50 trillion in debt? Someone's just going to one day just realize the United States isn't good on this money. And you know who owns most of the debt? China. China owns they buy a whole crap load of our debt, which is crazy to even think about. And this is why they have an undue influence on a lot of things. I didn't want to get too much into depth on Chinese influence, but if you're going to ask me after a couple of beers, who's a bigger problem, Russia or China? It's definitely, I mean, it's not even close. China, if anything, I thank Russia for the RT network because they do a lot of truth telling over there that the American media doesn't do.
Oh, yeah.
You tune that in, you're going to hear guys who are actually, investigative journalists and people who are really not left or right. They do have some lefties on there and they do have some guys that lean to the right, but it's balanced. It's truly balanced. It's not like we're telling you it's balanced. So yeah, I know it's because every time I tune in on YouTube is reminding me this is Russia affiliated or Russia state affiliated television. Like it's a warning shot to me. Ooh, you know what you're watching, right? But anyway, I just think that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I've noticed that myself. Anytime I watch an RT video, that they got to throw that little ad up there warning you, oh, wait a minute, you're watching Russian propaganda. Yeah. You're not watching CNN. You should be watching American propaganda.
Awesome.
Okay, well,
awesome.
Listen, I'm a proud American. I don't wish to live in Russia, but I'll be honest with you, between the two, I think Russian propaganda seems to be a little more informative than the CNNs and the MSNBCs and the Fox Newses of the world. You know why? Because they actually tell you the things that are newsworthy you won't hear on the other news networks.
Yep.
So, I don't want propaganda from anyone.
Right.
But in all honesty, I really don't think that Russia is the boogeyman we've been making it out to be. I don't.
Yeah.
And if what all the neocons and the neoliberals say about Russia is true, we'll humor them and say that it's true. Well, it's your fault that to a lot of people, they are coming across as heroic.
Yeah.
When they have a news network that's actually telling the American people the stories that American news and journalists don't want to cover, because they're doing the bidding of the pharmaceutical industry, the military industrial complex, and the status quo that has wrecked this country. Well, I got news for you. If Russia is the big bad boogeyman and a lot of people are looking at them like they're the second coming, of a certain holy deity, it's your own fault. It's your own fault. You could have been telling us this stuff. You could have been doing right by us, the American people, and the country as a whole. You could have been honest news and honest journalism, but instead, no, you're propaganda talking heads that try to corrupt the minds of people so that, again, they don't even realize that they're not part of the club, as George Carlin so eloquently kind of put it, right? When he also said that this country doesn't need smart people, they need obedient workers.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what mainstream media has conditioned people to be: obedient workers. You follow the status quo, you follow our system, you listen to what we tell you. Third parties don't work. Democrats good. If you go to Fox News, it's Republicans good, and the other side's bad. And here's the reason why. And none of it has to do with anything that's really going to make your life better. We're just going to talk about some racial issues and some inequality and blah, 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 blah. So all these people who found RT and feel like they're actually watching the kind of news they can't find anywhere else, again, it's your fault. It's your fault.
Yeah.
Now, as far as China being a bigger threat, I would agree with that. The thing on China is, and this has been something that I've always talked about with Trump's trade war when it comes to China. I applaud Donald Trump on the effort, but a question that I've always asked long before there was a President Trump, long before Trump even ran, I was a teenager. And when I learned of our history with China and all these jobs going to China because of bad trade deals we've negotiated, and the way things are structured, where it's in the favor of the Chinese, and how we have all this debt and they own a chunk of it. A question that I always asked is, from a negotiation standpoint, how do you get that genie back in the bottle with China?
Yeah.
I've always wondered, how is it possible? And so when people attack Donald Trump for trying, to me, that's preposterous.
Yeah.
Something needed to be done.
Yes.
We have massive trade deficits with China. The Chinese do not have our best interests at heart. They've stolen our what's the word? I want to say tech, but it's not tech. Like our intellectual property.
Yeah.
Okay. They've taken our intellectual property. They've taken that stuff and they've copyrighted. They've counterfeited. They've made knockoff versions of it and sold it as the real thing. Yeah. There was scandals in the past where toys that were made for children were being painted with lead paint, which of course was prohibited to be used, and it was resulting in lead poisoning of our children.
Right.
Okay. So you can run through all these things. Look, the Chinese simply are not our friend at the end of the day. Now, does that mean we should go to war with them? No. I would highly not recommend we go to war with China, but we certainly need to do something. But my question was always, how? As my grandpa once said, they've got you bent over a barrel. How do you negotiate from a position of strength to get any kind of a deal that works better for us? That's like one of those things where, look, we sold the farm here, people. We screwed the pooch. Yeah. They've got the upper hand, and it's not very easy when they're a superpower themselves to walk into the room and demand that you get a fair deal. Now, I got news for you. You demanding is honestly probably going to get you some kind of better result than going in there and begging for it. Because if that was the idea, is that we should just go into the room and beg for them and just say, look, I understand that the Bushes and the Clintons and all these other people gave you a steal of a deal and you're taking advantage of our country. But do the humane thing, please. Be more fair to us. Just be nice. We need a better deal. Would you pretty please do that? I mean, honestly, I'll get down on my hands. You think they're gonna do anything with a tactic like that besides laugh at you? Absolutely not.
Right.
So, you know, I applaud Trump for trying, but it's also one of those things where I don't really know that a deal can be reached because they've got too much leverage that can be used to their advantage to fight back when you try to get tough with them. And so that could be one of those things that you know, the damage has long been done. You can try to fight back, you can try for a better deal, but I just don't know that you're going to be able to force them into one, and they're certainly not just going to give you one out of the kindness of their heart.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, again, this is an issue too, where, and I'm not dumping on libertarians here, but it's the, you know, they'll say, well, the free market will work it out. We should just have open free trade. And it sounds good. And you had NAFTA, and that was supposed to make everything great. And it didn't. Our workers get sold out and factories left. And again, this is where people don't take into consideration the two systems. America is not a communist country. Okay, even though some people are worried that it's going to become one, or socialist or whatever. China is a full-blown, real. I mean, lockdowns in China are nothing, by the way. People say, oh, the Chinese, they lock down, everything's great over there. Really? Because they're kind of used to being locked down. They're locked down pretty much all the time in various ways. It's not a free society. It's kind of easy to make products for the Dollar Tree to sell to you because they're using slave labor in order to make those products. And human rights violations used to be kind of a thing. We used to kind of care about other countries and their human rights violations. I thought that's what the UN was kind of there for. Well, the UN, they look the other way because they have no power and they're not going to go up against China. So as you say, your grandfather said they got you over the barrel. And the other expression, little Southern expression, is that horse has left the barn and ain't coming back. So, you know, Trump is trying to jump on that horse and slow it down a little bit. And yeah, this is a populist move. And anybody who gets really serious about this, and this is some people, this is why they like Trump, and Democrats used to be into this stuff before Bill Clinton came along and said, oh no, we're new Democrats. We don't do this stuff anymore. We don't try to worry about that kind of stuff. Hey, we're just going with the flow. They're dumping a lot of cheap goods over here, driving the prices down here in the United States. That's all we care about. Who cares if there are no factories anymore? Who cares? I mean, some guy just lost a great, $20 an hour job that he had for 30 years with a pension and all these benefits. Remember when unions were a thing? And I used to probably think, hey, unions, they're overcharging, because they're not overcharging, but say they would drive the price of things up to have all these unions because they have all these benefits and they have to pass it along to consumers and so forth. Guess what? I'm okay with unions now because I see that workers in the workplace, this is where I agree with like the Green Party, is workplace democracy should be a thing. You shouldn't have this company who treats you like garbage, because that to me sounds like China. That sounds to me like a third world country. If you don't have a say in anything, yeah, they hire you on an at-will employee and all this stuff, and hey, and you're doing a great job, but then someday, say they find out, Charles, that you're a libertarian. They go, libertarians? Oh gosh, no. He can't work here anymore. Bye-bye, Charles. And they don't give you a reason, just like YouTube doesn't give somebody a reason for, is it with that Vagabond channel there that was providing all this great information about COVID? It was like, and I was watching it the day before they got canned. And I'm like, no, this was an awesome channel. Where did it go? I bookmarked it. So, I mean, I think we have a battle. It's like a battle across the board. It's information. It has to do with truth when it comes to the economy and what's going to help blue collar work, just workers in general. By the way, white collar workers and Wall Street types would benefit from a robust blue collar economy. you know. But the thing is, they've done all this investing in these multinationals that are all over the world, and that's where Wall Street. So when you see Wall Street going up, it's nice. Might be nice if you have a 401k, but it's all about that's
Right.
the world. That's the world economy, buddy. That's not, you know, mom and pop down the street trying to do a startup or anything. That's
No,
not some
no.
steel mill factory. That is, you know, General Dynamics, and they're in 75 countries. And sure, their stock's going up because guess what we're doing? We might elect a neoliberal who's going to go and blow crap up at the drop of a hat. So they're all like, who cares about Trump and his populist message when we have corporate money that, by the way, Biden is raking that in. I mean, if he wins, it's going to be because the advertising, which is, you know, it's crazy down here in Florida. It's nonstop. Plus you go on the computer, you click on any website, and all these ads appear, and you're just like, really? I just need to get away from this. But we got to wrap up soon, Charles.
I got a quick question for you here, since
Sure,
you
go
brought
ahead.
up a good point. Did you ever get around to watching any of those Lewis Black stand-ups?
Oh, dude, you know what? I'm sorry, I did not. And you told me about that. He was like, he
Hey,
was skewering both sides. I'm gonna have to go watch it now. Called me out.
when you check, definitely check it out. But he brought up a good point when we were talking about, you know, getting the money in and things like that. So I don't want to spoil it for you if you haven't gone and watched it yet. But yeah, definitely definitely go give it a check out, especially that most recent one that he did.
I will just, hey, and send me a reminder over on like Twitter, because I'm really forgetful. I was supposed to do a video with Reed Coverdale last weekend, and I'm like, well, I forgot. I was just the wife and the, you know, the kids, and the weekend happens, and then things. Anyway, that's, you know, I'll
Yeah.
full disclosure, that was my mistake. All right, so here's the ultimate question. We might do another video prior to election day. I'm thinking we probably will. I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about after election day, but if you're the prognosticator, Charles Anderson puts on his hat and he has to make a prediction about who's going to win this election. Who do you say wins it?
Who's actually going to win?
Who? Who'd you say?
We talking
Oh,
candidate wise, or who's actually going to win?
You can't use the brown wave. You got to predict. Sorry, man.
If I had to pick a candidate who would actually win, I'm still gonna have to go with probably Joe. Trump could surprise me. I don't look. Most people think that it's Joe Biden in a landslide. I don't think it's Joe Biden in a landslide. I put him at about 50-50, honestly, but really, I would make it about like, you know, 50.5 for Biden and 49.5 for Trump, right?
Yeah.
So to just in my opinion, Trump, I still think has a chance. But the biggest problem is I just think there's a lot of things that hammered Trump kind of all at one time. He didn't run the best campaign that he could have, you know, so we'll have to see. As far as who's actually going to win, though, and I won't say the brown wave, but I guess you could equivalent this to the brown wave. As far as who's actually going to win, it's going to be the same people who've been winning for years and years and years and years. You know, the thing is, you're going to hear Donald Trump talk about the economy. You're going to hear if Joe Biden wins, he'll talk about what he's doing with the economy. And Trump likes to point towards the stock market. You talked about the stock market. You know what? This shows just what kind of class they're in. You know, the only people who really sit down and talk about it being a good economy are rich people and politicians.
That's true.
Think about that for a moment. When was the last time you heard a blue blue collar person that just sat down and said, this is such a great economy. Like when no one in the middle class has honestly had that kind of enthusiasm unless they were some Republican hack or Democrat hack and just completely drinking that Kool-Aid. That's the only way. So as far as who's actually going to win, Big Pharma will probably end up winning. The military industrial complex, even if it's Trump who wins, will continue to win to a degree because they'll get plenty of funding.
Yep.
Okay. Wall Street will win.
Big league.
But the loser, to use Trump's good word there, big league. Yeah. Okay. But the loser, regardless of who wins, will without a doubt be all of us.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Here's my prediction for what happens on election day. Now, you need 270 electoral votes for victory. You're going to have neither candidate reach 270 electoral votes. That's my prediction. And it's going to it's going to drag on. I'm just throwing this out there as a scenario. I think on paper, and we talked about the likability and the popular vote, Biden will probably win the popular vote. I don't think that's really hard to predict that Biden. California alone is a state where Biden, they'll just run it up. And you know what they did to Bernie out there? And I was talking to Pasta. He said, you don't even understand what they do out here. So, I mean, they can stuff ballots and that's a strategy too, to make Trump look like a loser. Look, he didn't win the popular vote. So, hey, just let Biden be the president. I think some of those states you mentioned are still very toss up, like the Pennsylvanias, the Michigans, the Wisconsins. People have even told me that Minnesota might be in play because they're still ticked off. Those riots really hurt Minneapolis and the surrounding areas. And I've heard that there are a lot of people that are just ticked off and they don't want to vote for Democrats. So that might sway things. Plus you had that little incident up there with the ballot harvesting that got out into the we won't say mainstream, but it got out in independent media for a day or two. So my prediction is it's a tie. It's a tie, and there's going to have to be a tiebreaker that comes in. And I'm praying it's not. Imagine if it's the Supreme Court again, and Coney Barrett is the deciding vote on that tiebreaker. The country will be over if that happens, because there's just going to be so much turmoil, angst, and I can't even imagine the amount of civil unrest that the Supreme Court is going to have to decide an election, and especially after, Trump and this woman is going to get nominated. There's no question she's going to get onto the court. It's a done deal. So I'm going to say, and I know that's kind of chicken.
One thing out there. Yeah. I got to throw something out there real quick. I don't know if you watched any of these videos or not, but when you say a tie, I'm guessing like with 269, 269.
Something like that.
I've actually watched a video recently. Yeah, I've watched something where they broke down how it could happen, and they broke down a scenario, and I believe it was New Hampshire, where they split the electoral votes.
Yeah,
and they brought up like if, like I said earlier, Biden got all of Clinton's, Trump kept all of his, except Biden got Wisconsin and Michigan, Trump kept Pennsylvania. And then if the votes got split just right in New Hampshire, where they were split up, it brought it to 269. Now, you brought up the Supreme Court. If I'm not mistaken, what they were explaining was in the case of a tie that no one reaches 270. Now, I knew this part. The president will then be determined by the House of Representatives. Okay. The House gets to vote on who the president should be.
Yeah.
Here's the kicker, David. If the Democrats don't take the Senate back over, and arguably they wouldn't really take it back over until after January, right?
Yeah.
So the Republicans will have the Senate. Mm-hmm. The Senate picks the vice president.
Oh my gosh.
Think about how that could turn out if it reaches that point. You could end up with Biden Pence.
And when you say Biden Pence, you know the term that I hear, bombs away. There's just, I mean, talk about a neoliberal war ticket.
Absolutely.
And those guys would get along great. They get along great. Sorry, they would.
Hey,
I know
it's
people.
bipartisanship, David.
It'd be, hey, we're for the same war.
Their name, their initials literally spell it out. BP, bipartisanship.
Or BP for big oil companies.
Right.
Shell, BP, Gulf, all the major oil companies, you know? It says drill,
Exxon.
baby, drill. All the environmentalists will be so happy because then Kamala won't be there to say, well, let's have a conversation about that. All right, those predictions are awesome. We've got to send this video up to YouTube and have it, be out there for a while so we can become celebrities and we can have millions of views, and I can direct people to the Lone Wolf podcast, which is now broken 400 and climbing, because we're going to plug. We're going to tell you subscribe. You don't even have to subscribe to Tulsiology. Subscribe to the Lone Wolf podcast, because we want to get Charles monetized, and we need 600. We need at least 600 people to join, probably a bigger cushion, because it's going to go up and down for the next 20 years. So we want Charles to get over that hump so he can start earning some serious revenue via YouTube.
I appreciate that. I really do.
I haven't even drank anything yet today. I mean, coffee, yes, but the caffeine is probably more effective than alcohol here. So again, I want to thank my special guest, Charles Anderson. You can catch him over on Twitter as well. You're still the Vigilant Independent over on Twitter, your handle. And
yeah,
you could check out my 2 channels, Tulsiology, and I'm just me on Twitter. I decided to stop being other people. It's just easier. But we'll see what happens, Charles. We'll have to do a follow-up video and see how our predictions panned out.